This paper is called The Macroeconomy as a Random Forest. I'm Philippe from the Université du Québec, Montréal. This was mostly written during my time at Penn. Sorry, there's a bit of a background noise. I don't know where it comes from, mostly birds. But anyway, uh, what is the final destination of this paper? The idea is to flexibly model macro relationship without assuming what flexible means first. And, that doesn't come as a big surprise to anybody here, but you could think about something like a Phillips curve, which is a mapping between unemployment gap and inflation. Obviously, you want to get this correctly. It's very broad, but it has a lot of implications, especially right now. I don't think I need to motivate this any further. Uh, the paper asks a bunch of questions. The big one is, how do we successfully get this arrow here? And one way you could do that is using off-the-shelf machine learning, non-parametric machine learning techniques. But as we know, those are usually very good when you have a lot of data and there's little noise in that data, which is obviously not what we have in macro. So those deep, neural networks or plain random forests or boosting, they're likely going to be too flexible and wildly inefficient for the short time series that we have. And then moreover, even if you get good results, there will be no obvious parameters to look at. So the interpretation of your new machine learning model will be a bit hard, just hard to have. So not good. Another way you could do that to get some very flexible mapping of this thing is to assume some form of nonlinearity and let the parameters vary through time. There's a subscript t here on beta. However, the way this is usually done in literature is a bit in a rigid fashion, in the sense that those will have a law of motion, but you really need to decide what the law of motion is going to be before you even have a look at the data. It can be time varying parameters like random walks, could be a threshold model, could be a switching process, could be structural breaks, but you need to sort of decide what it's going to be. And often what we find is that in sample fit does not translate into magical out of sample gain. So the solution in this paper is generalized time varying parameters, and they're going to happen through random forest. And really the idea here is that ST is all the data under the sun. So this, that specific sun in the States is the Fred database. Usually you throw that to a random forest into your target and that's it, but then you have nothing really to look at. What we're going to be doing in this paper is build a new form of forest, so then implicitly, because we're not ever going to fit betas because they're not observed, but implicitly we'll be able to back out betas that are time varying according to a linear equation. So the power of machine learning is going to be shown into the betas, and then you could have this being a Phillips curve, a Taylor rule, or some exchange rate equation, and then we have this in thrown into YT. But then here there's a layer of interpretability. There will be credible region. You can look at those. So the model I'm proposing is a nice meeting halfway, because with a big ST, you'll be able to generalize a lot of nonlinearities that have been proposed in the literature, like structural change, structural break, threshold, regime switching, a lot of good stuff. That's why I call them generalized time varying parameters. That's how you want to look at it. Linear equation, betas varying according to a forest. And importantly, from a forecasting perspective, it's going to bring ML closer to the reality of short time series. If there's persistence, if there are strong linear signals, you don't want to model everything non-parametrically. You want to retrieve degrees of freedom. Having this little linear part and making it vary according to machine learning is going to help you tremendously in achieving that. So I do forecasting in the paper, lots of things. This is just one thing I thought is nice to look at. This is unemployment rate change around 2008. The yellow line is one of those models I'm proposing, where the linear part in this macro random forest is a small factor model. Okay, so we talk about factor models, and another way to make them nonlinear is you throw them in the linear equation, and that linear equation is going to be wildly nonlinear. That's what we're doing here. So you see the yellow line for 1 quarter ahead forecast. The black line is the true. The yellow line is that forecast. As you can tell, it's pretty much right on. Even a year ahead, it still called for a recession. Obviously, not as bad as we got. But still, it does call for something, that is coming. The green line is the plain random forest. So you really see that the plain machine learning algorithm really does not cut it. And then the gray line is like an autoregressive benchmark, which is not so bad either. So you really see that this hybrid approach that takes some knowledge from time series and some knowledge from ML, put it together, does, give you pretty good result. And then you can interpret the forecast. That's the point, right? So these are the generalized time varying parameters of the equation generating the forecast we just had a look at. I'm not going to go through this in all details in the paper, but I just find that something called a forward-looking factor, its effect on unemployment rate change just double every recession. And after the dash line, this is a behavior that the algorithm creates out of sample. It never, hasn't seen the 2008 episode, just creates it out of sample. So it's really learning something, not just imitating.
1 minute.
Good. And then what I do, again, you have a look at the paper if you want to see the details. I look at a Phillips curve and I say, okay, let's have the parameters vary in a standard way. Let's have the parameters vary in the random forest way. And this is the unemployment gap coefficient in the States. The orange line is the typical TVP estimate, random walk memory parameters. And it tells you the typical story going down smoothly. If you fit the new algorithm, which is much more flexible, it is going down, but also has some switching behavior. And that switching behavior is actually especially important around recession. So I detailed that quite a bit. And I'm just closing by showing you this. A friend of mine was running the algorithm yesterday and sent that to me. It's called under pressure, like the sun employment cost index in the States. So we see that for a 1 quarter ahead forecast, the MRF is the blue line, the truth is the red line. It's pretty much right on. And what it's telling us, in the next quarter, actually the current quarter, which is going to be released in July, at the end of July, is that obviously it's going up somewhere in that region. So anyway, you can use MRF pretty easily. There's an R package. That's what my friend did. It seems to work well. If you want to know more, check the paper. Thank you.